These are metals that have low melting temperatures, that are easy to work, they're soft, and these metals began to be exported into Mesopotamia. Metal alloys were invented in the Iranian plateau, and copper and tin were combined to make bronze, and this is a huge advancement. Bronze is still a relatively easy metal to work, but it's more durable than either copper or gold. And so you can make more lasting tools out of this. Copper and gold are really too soft to have durable tools. Bronze is a whole different story. It becomes widely made all over, but it starts here. And you start to see improvements to certain tools, especially agricultural tools, where they start tipping plows with metal, with bronze. And this makes these plows much more durable, and it allows agricultural activities to become more productive. You're not spending all your time making tools to conduct agriculture. You're actually doing the agricultural activities at that time. Other sites in the Iranian plateau includes a site called Tepe Yahya, and you can see it's kind of the circular site. The guy that excavated this was a guy out of Harvard. He just dug a long trench through the whole damn middle of this thing. You don't really get an idea of what's going on there. You get a chronology, but you don't get an idea of the construction here. But this is a tell, and it's a deep tell, and so it's hard to work out the structure here. We do find evidence of writing and this kind of proto-cuneiform kind of writing style, which they adopted from Mesopotamia, and you see very elaborate artifacts. This is a chlorite vessel that's carved stone, very elaborately carved stone, and so you see the interaction between the Iranian plateau and Samaria, where you get this larger trading network being established and these very elaborate kinds of tools being made. Let me pull this out. Okay. Let's go to Harappa, I think, here. Let me start to share this if I can. So we're moving a little bit further to the east, and we're going to talk about the Indus civilizations. At about 6,000 BC, so 8,000 years ago or so, we see early farming villages on the eastern edge of the Iranian plateau and in the Indus River Valley. And these began to expand as well. Initially, these things are not focused on intensive agriculture, but that increases. One of the early sites of Mekhart, we see there clusters of mud brick dwellings, houses with ovens and granaries, typical kind of Neolithic kinds of style of communities. They're growing wheat and barley, but there's still quite a reliance on wild plants and animals. You don't have this shift over to more intensive agricultural until later on in the Neolithic period. But the later Neolithic groups, you see this more intensified agriculture and herding economies established. But it begins early on there, and these are groups that are expanding out from the Iranian plateau or adopting. Yeah. Is this not on the? Oh, my fault. Oh, yeah, I'll put this up there. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I will put this in. You look at the Indus River Valley, what you see is a very large river. There's a focus on water resources and aquatic resources. But these agricultural communities, as you can see, there's one here, grew up around the edges of these river systems. And from early on, there's a real focus on water. Between about 5,000 BC and about 2,600 BC, so for about 2,400 years or so, is what we call the Regionalization Era. And this is when the Neolithic communities grow up to a point, and you start to see different sort of communities that become more identifiable, mainly through ceramic distinctions here. Their ceramics start to dip. They grow and they increase in size. You start to get small urban centers. At about 5000 BC, cattle become an important part of the economy, and cattle in all of the overall, the Central and Western Asian societies, cattle are a major part of this. But the roles that cattle play differ between these communities in a big way. So by about 4000 BC, the larger settlements begin to shift to the Indus River floodplains. And this is when you start to get these unique societies developing in the Indus River Valley. This is the Indus River Valley here. You can see this is sort of a modern map, not a great map here. It includes eastern Pakistan and western India. This is the site of Nagar here, the early Neolithic site, but there are a lot of other major sites here. We'll talk about a number of these. Harappa is here, Mohindojaro is here. We'll talk about some of the others as well. But this becomes the major focus for the Indus River civilizations. 2600 to 2000 is a period known as the Integration Era. This is when Harappan civilization sort of takes over. It's a little bit later than what we see in Mesopotamia and in the Iranian Plateau. And what we began to see here are these development of these large urban centers, Harappa, Mohindojaro, Kanwar, Riwala, and Rakhikari. I'm not great with these names. But these are major urban centers. And these are unique compared to the Iranian Plateau and to, and we'll see why, and to Mesopotamia. There are also a lot of smaller towns and larger and smaller villages. And what we see developing here very quickly is a very dense on-the-ground population, with these major communities with satellite centers around them, with this kind of hierarchy of community sizes, but focused on these large towns. If we look at one of the earliest sites that was excavated is Mohindojaro. This was excavated in the 20s and then later in the 40s and the 50s, and still going on there. One of my doctors actually grew up near here and used to go here as a kid on school tours. But the core part of this urban center is here in this elevated area known as the Citadel. It's a walled city, and inside of this you have features that were called the college, the bath, the stupa, which is the religious center, the granary, the stairs and assembly hall. There's fortifications, there's towers, and there's a large scattering of domestic structures, houses below the Citadel. But in here you had the elite from this community lived here. And one of the things that characterizes Harappan cities is the extremely well-organized urban planning. That's not the case for Mesopotamia or the Iranian Plateau. Those communities kind of grew up and became kind of jumbled. It's like if you've ever been into a medieval village in Europe, they're just roads and stuff that just go everywhere. These urban centers here are extremely well laid out and extremely well organized. There is the first clear case of true urban planning. Someone designed this city and then built it. It's not a haphazard layout. It's incredibly well designed. And we'll look at some of these examples here down the road. Before 2600 BC, Mesopotamia traded primarily with the Iranian Plateau and to the west. But after 2600 BC, there was a shift to more ocean-related trading, and that ocean trading kind of hopscotched over the Iranian Plateau and started trading more intensively with South Central Asian communities. And it's believed that these early trading communities before the Harappan Plateau created the foundation for the Harappan civilization. And these earlier trade-focused communities are in the southern part near the ocean, and then at about 2600 BC, you had a more intensive population occupation in the Indus River Valley. From Mesopotamia, Mesopotamia received from the Harappan Plateau ivory, because they're Indian elephants, of course, oils, wooden furniture, gold, silver, carnelian, which is a red stone, a chalcedony rock, and it was being carved. And again, Mesopotamia traded out probably food surpluses. Mesopotamia was sort of the breadbasket of southern Asia at this point in time. It was more productive in terms of producing food, but again, it lacked the mineral goods that a lot of these other communities had. But it had rich agricultural lands, and that's what it was trading. It was trading food. Also, wool, because they were raising sheep for wool at this stage. They were making cloth. They were making leather products, and certain kinds of vegetable oils were being traded out as well. And so you had these symbiotic trade relationships that were existing between these different areas. Major cities in the Indus River Valley included the site of Harappa, which is the site to which the civilization is named, Mohindojaro, Kalibangan, Chandahagaro, and Goranj. And each one of these was its own unique city-state. There were others as well. It's estimated that 35 to 40,000 people lived, for instance, at Harappa, one of the bigger communities. And there is, again, as I said, the systematic layout that is repeated at each one of these cities. It's not that just Harappa had this. We'll show Harappa and Mohindojaro as well. But all of these towns had this standardized layout, and that layout had to have been designed. These towns were not made kind of as they developed. They were laid out and then built. One of the things that's interesting is these Harappan cities lack evidence of an elite ruler class and palaces, and so that's a unique thing. Probably they were ruled by a priesthood, but they didn't have this large elite ruler class. So here you can see the Citadel of Mohindojaro, and it's up on this high elevated land. This is all tell construction. These are structures built on top of structures, but you can see this layout here. This is what it would have. These are they're fairly slick kind of three-dimensional maps have been made out of these. So you can see the layout with this cross structure. These are roads that go through the middle. The roads are a standardized width. The structures that line the roads are built at standardized locations. It's all very, very well controlled. There's a lower city here and an upper city here, and then there's communities, kind of, just farming small houses, stuff scattered all the way around these as well. In Mohindojaro, you had these structures that were built that are believed to be public baths. And there are, we think, bathing ceremonies that are associated with this. These types, not the same ones, but these types of ceremonies continue today in Egyptian society in the Ganges River. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. But this is, we believe, is the beginning of these bath ceremonies, something you don't really see in the Iranian Plateau or in Mesopotamia at all. There are these large granaries, so they're amassing surplus that are built in these city centers, very elaborate structures. This is the interior of one of these roads that has been excavated. You can see there's sort of a dividing area here. All the structures are built, they're standard sizes, shapes, and widths between them. Everything's laid out and very well laid out. This is not happenstance at all. This was designed someone designed these communities and built them. There's all sorts of focus on water. So there's drainage systems, there's toilets, there's fresh water that comes in, and you can access it through these water fountains here. And there's this compared to other civilizations, Sumerian and what we see, Susa on the Iranian Plateau and all these, there is a much better design system of access of water coming into the community and water draining away from the community, and more concerned with kind of public health and cleanliness in a huge way. And these are just really quite a bit different than what we see. There are elite houses in there as well, where we see these complex structures that include water areas, storage areas, toilets, etc. Obviously not every house had these, but the elite, and we do see elite, but they're not. We don't think that they're rulers as well. And the other thing is there's a whole industry that exists on making movies about the Harappan civilization out of Bollywood. You can follow the YouTube on this, and I don't know if this link is still good, but you can watch a whole little trailer for this movie Mohindojaro that was popular a few years ago. Let's see if I can just pull this up. Keep this. Let's pretend for Rafa 2. See if we can pull that up. Did that stay? I'm not sure if that. Let me make sure that stayed on this. Okay. So some of us, can anyone tell if that's? No, right. I don't think that. Share that. There, I think that. Okay. When we look at Harappan civilization, we see a real elaboration of goods and unique styles and designs, which is not surprising. We see clay figurines that were deposited in the ritual baths, and we do think these ritual baths are not just there for public bathing, but they're there for public rituals. As we see today, in these sites, we see lots of a lot of times the toys that you find that are made, these are all made out of clay, tell you things about these societies that you can't get from anywhere else. We see that these have real vehicles, they have toys. There's elaborate toys of cattle here. There are these clay balls and other kinds of features here. And we see these things are tell you something about the societies exist. There are lots of what we believe are games, marbles, dice. Look like modern dice. We probably gambling quite a bit. There are different kinds of games you can play with marbles here, and they're clay marbles as well as stone marbles that are carved. We also see human figurines that are carved in elaborate ways. This is believed to be a priest figure carved out of stone, very well adorned here. Lots of attention to facial details. The beard is extremely well manicured, much better than mine, and hair with again kind of a headband here. Again, very elaborate clothing and adornments here. We also see that they have a regular system of weights. This is a trading empire where they're trading goods, and so you have to be able to weigh things of equal weights. These carved stone cubes are of different weights, and that would have been something that you would have used for trade and exchange. If you want to make sure that you have standardized weights, so you have standardized trade and standardized values. This all precedes the development of currencies, but the standardization of trade is important. We also know that there was a writing system that developed here it was kind of quasi-pictographic. This writing system still has not been deciphered. If you want to make a splash in archaeology, figure out what this writing means. But we see all sorts of images that are reflected. So here's a rhinoceros here, an Indian rhinoceros. So all sorts of symbols here. There's here on these, and they had clay tablets here. These are fired clay tablets. Here you have another rhino there, and you do have elephants and leopards, and there's an elephant there and a leopard there. But here you have this what is assumed to be sort of a god figure, not unlike Shiva is in modern Indian religion here. But what all these means, we don't know. Is his religious writing is somehow recording economic activities? We don't know. No one's been able to break this. But clearly, there's stuff that's being written here with these symbols. There's cattle here, other cattle here. The cattle that evolved in India may have been domesticated there independently. Certainly, the breed is considered a sub-breed of the European cattle, or a different breed from European cattle. These are called zebu. They have this classic kind of fatty hump on their shoulders here. You can see this is watercraft being shown here, so they were moving things around in boats. And it's very clear that cattle played a prominent role in this civilization. Exactly what role, we don't know. We know that today cattle are considered kind of sub-gods in Hindu religion, and they're not to be eaten. And they may have been the same kind of thing here. We see an ox cart here that is being drawn by cattle here. Elaborate, the pottery is very elaborate as well. So they were producing high quality goods. They had access to a lot of minerals, and they also had these huge, the Indus River Valley and the Ganges River Valley both had massively large floodplains that were productive for agricultural products. At about 1700 or so BC, the Harappan sites began to be abandoned, and we don't really know why. We do know that their trade network began to kind of collapse, and the amount of trade goods slowed down. The distances in which trade was occurring became shorter, and so they became more insular in that sense. We also know that one of the major river valleys of the tributaries of the Indus River had a series of earthquakes there, and the Sarasway River, and we believe that this river more or less dried out, and it caused the abandonment of one of the Harappan centers, Ganwari Wala. Was repopulated, and after that, the other centers began to be abandoned. And so it's almost like they had a hyper-integrated economic system, and that one of the components of that economic system failed, and it caused a kind of a domino effect with the others, where they all began to be depopulated and failed. At about the same time, we see that rice has begun to be cultivated in the Ganges River Valley, about 1500 or so, and we see that the population centers that existed in the Indus River Valley shifted to the Ganges River, shifted to the east. Whether these whether we had a die-off in the Indus River Valley because of some sort of economic collapse, and just an increase because of increased agricultural production in the Ganges River, we don't know, but there definitely was this shift in population from the west to the east. And we see that in other societies. You see that in the American West and in the Puebloan societies, where up to about 1150, the Four Corners area had the largest populations. And then after that, those populations collapsed, and you see the populations begin to increase in the northern Rio Grande and northern Mexico. At about the same time, you have this Sanskrit language developed in the Ganges River area here. And you begin to get the first early Hindu texts. These are the Rig Vedas. These, we can read these, we know what they say. There are lots of similarities that can be drawn between the early Sanskrit stories that are preserved in the Rig Vedas and some of the symbols that we see in the Harappan civilization. So it's generally believed that the Harappan civilization formed the foundation for Indian society, but with some major changes there. Okay, I'm going to finish early, if that's okay with everybody. Let you guys go. Hopefully, you'll have a great holiday, and everyone be safe and stay out of trouble.